Welcome back to the Sports Business Take Podcast, your home for sports industry news with a little personality. I'm Paul Hine. He is Zach Creekmore. How you doing today, Zach?
Doing good, Paul. How you doing today, brother?
I totally forgot what our intro was for like half a second. All right, so folks, this is probably going to be a bit of a rough podcast. We have had a bunch of technical issues for the last week or so. It's Friday night, but you know what? Nobody else is gritting out a pod like us on a Friday night in college. So props to us for that. But this is the first time I'm recording in my room, and at the moment, my laptop is set up on a rocking chair, and I have notebooks holding up my microphone. So we'll see how that goes. Obviously, you guys can see I have jerseys in the background. I can even move my computer to show you all what they are because it's like stuck on the chair, and I have no table in my room. So we'll work with what we got. But besides that, we've had tons of technical issues over the last week. So all the clips that I posted on social media were done at a Starbucks because we had no Wi-Fi on campus for 5 days because of a cybersecurity issue. We'll call it that. And I mean, like, dude, it's just been a rough week. I mean, even tonight, you're not even in your room like you usually are. You're in a classroom building right now, so it's, dude, we've had some issues this week. Makes it hard to record a podcast and do a podcast when you have all this stuff going on. So if you guys hear any background noise, it is a dorm. It is noisy. It is a Friday night, so just be mindful of that. I cut out all the background noise anyway, but if it sneaks through. All right, but I'm actually excited because we're talking about a couple of things today that we don't usually really talk about, particularly the World Surfing League. I don't think we've ever mentioned on this podcast before, not one time. And honestly, something before this story that I didn't know a lot about. I have a couple of friends who are really into surfing. My cousin's really into surfing, and like what I know about it, I know from them. But I really didn't know that much about like pro surfing until I read a couple articles on this. So, but before we do that, I want to talk about the NWSL. So, since you're the soccer guy, why don't you introduce this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. So NWSL, I forget what the N stands for, but it's
National
Professional
Women's
Women's Soccer League. Thank you. National Women's Soccer League.
I got you.
USA Nation's Professional Soccer League, one of the top women's soccer leagues in the world. This past year, we already talked about it. They had an amazing $250 million 4-year domestic media rights agreement deal with CBS Sports, which goes across ESPN, Prime Video, Script Sports, a bunch of different places where they're going to have all their games streamed. But really interesting now, just coming out this week, the NWSL creates NWSL Plus, which is going to be their own streaming service, which is going to have 70 plus games. So you get full access to more than 70 live matches, highlights, full replays, and more for the 2024 NWSL season. Wow.
So,
right. Super cool. What do we think?
So it's really cool to see a league create their own streaming service in the first place, especially a league that is really just starting to take off, especially with the media rights deal that they just signed that you mentioned. But what I think the biggest key piece of this story is the fact that I don't know if you said this already, but the fact that it's free. The streaming service is free. You never hear of that ever. It's 2024. Nothing is free, especially when it comes to sports. And I think honestly that this is a really smart tactic from the league, saying our streaming service is free. We're going to be unique. We're going to separate ourselves from all the other leagues who have done similar things, who charge customers a good premium to pay for their streaming service. And even teams have done this, right? But I think it's super interesting to see the free aspect of it. So I wanted to ask you, why do you think they chose to do it this way? Why do you think they chose to make it a free stream service?
Yes, absolutely. And I think I've seen this through a couple of other leagues. Like we see a lot of NCAA leagues, especially the lower levels, do this. We see a lot of USL teams do this type of strategy or media strategy where you're putting the content out for free. but that's often at a much lower level. So seeing the NWSL, which is a leading league in women's soccer, really doing it is super unique. But really, what it's thinking, and you're thinking about, this is a marketing idea. This is how we're trying to get people to watch our games. This is how we're trying to get people to watch our teams, become fans of our teams. You're creating a lower commitment entry level. So somebody who's like, I might want to watch a game is more likely to go and watch a game because they can watch it for free, rather than someone who is going
Absolutely.
to say, I don't know if I want to watch a game or not. Oh, it's $5. Oh, maybe I shouldn't.
Right. It's not a pain
Especially
in
if
the
they're
ass to
trying to
do.
build, yeah, absolutely. Right. And especially if they're trying to build generational audiences and audience for the future, we're looking at young girls who are going to want to watch the NWSL, right? So ages 8 plus, right? Maybe 8 to 15, where they'd have to go ask their parents to buy the streaming service. So maybe they can't do that. So creating a really cool opportunity there where you're really able to attack that next generation of viewers. And if the NWSL can attach themselves to that, they can really grow. Um, Now,
Absolutely.
is it financially a good idea? Realistically, no. But is it, in terms of branding and connection and businesses, a really unique idea and really unique concept that can generate a lot of fandom because the entry level to commit to being a fan is a lot lower? Absolutely. And it's super interesting to see how it's going to go for them.
So I'm going to argue that it is a good idea financially, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I think having this be the entry point gets you more sales in other areas, like merchandising, like ticket sales, that type of stuff, right? Because if somebody gets on the streaming service for free and gets hooked on an NWSL game, then they're going to be have a better affiliation with that product, right? Because they think, oh, these guys are awesome, and I got it for free. So, maybe they'll even like feel a little bit bad about seeing their product without having to pay for it because that's the world we live in. So they're going to go buy a jersey, or they'll buy a T-shirt, or they'll buy tickets to a game. Their nearest franchise or whatever. So I think it's more about getting people in the door than it is about the actual money concept. It's getting people to say, introducing people to the league, essentially, right? You're saying, this is who we are. Do you like us? If you do, then go buy our other stuff, right? I actually think that's kind of a unique marketing perspective, and one that I kind of love, honestly, because it's so rare to see anything like this, that it creates an affinity in the consumer's mind where they think, this company really cares about the fans because they're not trying to charge a premium for their product, right? They're not trying to essentially rip people off and just get more money out of them. I think a lot of people nowadays can see right through that kind of stuff, especially with sports teams. So I think it's really a smart move for them. And I could be wrong. It could fall on its head. I don't know like how much it costs to put this together, but I honestly like I would gotta think that the money that they're gonna make from ticket sales, just from the exposure alone, ticket sales and merchandise from the exposure alone, is gonna outweigh the cost that it took them to set this up.
And I think you're absolutely right. It's definitely possible that that'll happen. And I think in that scenario, we're looking at more of, they're trying to go for a break even, or even a slight negative, because they're really investing in trying to build that fandom, right? So they're looking and saying, can we take a loss in the current and go and say, okay, but we're going to be building these fan bases for years to come, who, when we have that premium streaming service after this $240 million deal, right? So we're looking at 5, 10 years down the line, do we
Yeah,
have those fans who are going to want to buy that streaming service? Because um, if you're running a sports franchise, we did it in sports finance this semester, your number one stream of revenue is always going to be broadcasting. It's just you have
yeah,
where you have the most eyes on you.
yeah. That's
um,
just the way
even
the
though
industry
all the
works.
other even though all the other things kind of come in and add on to it. Like, for example, my sports franchise in sports finance, which is going to be really, this is a weird tie-in, right? But I made $48 million or so from broadcasting, and everything else I made was just kind of everything else. And I didn't have good attendance. My team was absolutely horrible, but I made plenty of money from broadcasting because of how the league negotiated, right? So thinking about it from the NWSL perspective, we're going to say, okay, right now we're not getting a ton from broadcasting, right? They have that $250
Well, they're
million
getting more
dollar
than they
deal,
used to.
more than they used to, but it's still less than every other league in the world,
True.
right? So it's still
You
not
gotta start somewhere.
comparable to a, yeah, absolutely have to start somewhere, but it's not comparable to the male counterparts that they want to be comparable to,
Right.
right? Of where they want to see themselves in 10 years. I'm absolutely positive the NWSL's vision is to see them being one of the top competing soccer leagues in the world, not
Yeah.
just the top women's competing women's soccer league in the world, right?
Yeah, I really feel like this is a jumping off point in a way. It's I think this is almost a temporary move. You mentioned something about in the future how they could have a premium service, which like I think that would be kind of smart. Is you try this out for a couple years, have your fan base grow, and then once you have people hooked, then you make them pay the money. You know what I mean? At least from a financial perspective, and that's probably the strategy. It's probably something like a 5 or 10 year plan where they're going to say we want to increase our eyeballs by X amount of people, and then we'll implement the paid version of what we have and maybe add an extra piece of like behind the scenes content or something like that to make it worth the money. Once people are hooked in and have the fandom um, inside of them, I guess I get a horrible way to phrase it, but but I like it really seems like it's a plan for the future, like a temporary plan right now that is smart for the future, if that makes any sense. Especially because it includes the launch of an app. So it
Mm,
makes it super easy to access for fans because they can watch not only on the TVs but on their phones too. I know for me, when I don't have access to a TV, YouTube TV immediately is my go to if I'm trying to watch a sports event, right? So them having something similar for their fans is going to be super convenient, and I think that will be part of the reason that people stick with the NWSL after getting introduced to them by watching a game on the service.
absolutely agree. And I think the app is a huge part of it and a massive piece of it, right? Because without the app, maybe it isn't as easy to connect with that audience. If they were just doing it through a website, the entry level gets that little bit
Yeah,
harder because maybe the end website has issues. It's hard to sign on, whatever. And that person who's clicking on the link from a Teams page is going to that website and it's like,
yeah,
well, I really don't want to give all my email or information. An app, super easy to do. A lot of people love it, especially if you're getting at that younger generation that I think the NWSL should be targeting. Really smart. And I think if we're looking at it from a marketing perspective, this is a freemium, right? We're
yeah,
looking at a free service for a period of time. So think Spotify offering you that 3 months free before. I got a month free on Spotify. I've been playing for Spotify for the last 8 months. They've made $100 plus on me, right? That's effectively they took me from a customer who wasn't going to spend money to one who is spending money, right? Because they
right.
offered that free. Now, seeing that hopefully that does build and that fandom does build, I think it's really just something we have to wait and see with time. But I think the use of the app and how that's going to work out is going to be perfect, especially because you can really make it a unique and personalized experience for their league. So they're not going to be going to, even though they have the deal with CBS, but let's say they're not going to an ESPN, right, where they're going to be thrown on ESPN the Ocho or ESPN2 for a game night when they're battling with a NBA or
Right.
a MLS game, right? So that competition level and the way you're able to focus and make your media and make your league feel important in its own right is really, really key.
Yeah, I think this will definitely be a very positive step forward for them. And I honestly I expect the NWSL to have a big year this year between this and the new media rights deal that they just signed. On top of the fact that they're one of the fastest growing leagues in the world, you add all that together, they are primed for a really big boom in 2024. So super excited for that. I don't really know if I have too much else on that to be honest, unless you do. I mean, I think that is we really covered the bones of it.
Agreed. I think we hit the nail on the coffin. Or, well, hit the nail on the head. Something. Not on the coffin. We're not saying the NSL, that NWSL is dying. That's not what I want.
I'm sorry, that phrase was just hilarious. I don't know why. Uh, all right.
My self realization, I messed that up.
Speaking of deals, TV deals, we're going to talk about the World Surfing League signing a deal with ESPN Plus. So this is awesome to me because I didn't even know the World Surfing League existed. I got to be honest, I really didn't even know this existed before I saw this story in the news, which is like the fact that they're getting the exposure because there's probably a ton of people like me who like have maybe tried surfing once or twice and like it, or like know people who surf but aren't like avid surfers, who maybe haven't heard of the league, but them getting the exposure through signing this deal with ESPN is gonna bring them people, right? It's gonna bring people to their league. So it's gonna be the deal includes coverage of 10 World Surfing League championships, coverage of the 9-day U.S. Open of Surfing Challenger Series contest in August, as well as a documentary, World Surfing League Inside Pro Surfing is the name of the documentary. And I think the documentary in particular is probably the biggest piece of this, but it also makes sense to have your championships be the primary feature of your first big media deal, right? Like they weren't on ESPN, they weren't on Fox Sports, they weren't on any of these major networks before. So now that they have that, starting with the top of your product, like the championships, that's the highest level that you're of competition that you're going to have. That makes a ton of sense if you're trying to pull people in. What did you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I think ESPN, I think board sports, I immediately go to the X Games. It's just the first
Yeah,
thing that comes to mind in terms of
or even
comparable
the
thing. And
Olympics.
yeah, exactly. Or even the Olympics, right? And I think skateboarding, and I see that, and I see the great work that ESPN, in some cases, has been able to do with the X Games. And when it's advertised really well, it's really pushed for a very short period of time. So it kind of becomes their focus for a week. So it's not competing with those other major sports leagues or sports games because it has a unique model and it's in a unique moment for a very short period of time. Um, and I'm not entirely sure how the league is structured, if it's a week in, week out type of league, or if it's something where they play during a very specific amount of time or a very short amount of time. But I think the interaction for them in that 9-day championship is going to be super cool because you could go X Games similar model where it's really, really super focused. During the rest of it, though, I'm not entirely sure how ESPN is going to be able to, one, market them as something different and give them that really comparative and competitive advertisement when there's going to be a lot of other stuff on.
Well, that's where I think
So
the
again, you're trying to
documentary
buy
comes in.
eyeballs. Correct, exactly. And that's me just thinking from pure streaming of the actual sport,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Then we go into the documentary, which I think is awesome, super unique, and we think ESPN, um, whatever the stories, the 60-minute type stories, right? And I forget what
Yeah.
they're called.
Sports documentaries have been taking off in the last couple of years, and I think it's a really great way to introduce kind of somewhat niche sports into the eyes of mainstream consumers, right? People that watch like the big four leagues that you typically talk about, the NHL, NFL, MLB, NBA, and MLS in there too. But in order to introduce these kind of more niche sports leagues where they can only be done in certain parts of the world where it's like really warm for surfing, right? I mean, unless you can surf in cold conditions, but they typically don't have tournaments in those types of places. So, and a lot of people who do love surfing would much prefer to surf in warmer climates. So, there's a little limiting factor there. But in terms of the documentary, I think it's a great way to introduce the sport to mainstream fans because you've seen success with those types of things in the past. A great example that came to mind for me was Netflix's documentary about F1, right? Drive to Survive was the name of it. And that after that documentary came out, ESPN saw a jump in viewership in F1 races and F1 sponsorship revenue. So that gained that wasn't even on ESPN, and it gained them traction for that sport, right? So obviously, these documentaries that come out like this have a huge impact in gaining fans. So this is a really smart way to say, hey, I know our product is not necessarily reaching the amount of people that we want it to. What's a unique way that we can show off? And I think this
Mm.
is a great avenue to do that. Maybe not show off is the right word, but showcase our product in a way that we can show people the beauty in it that we see.
Absolutely agree and well said. That's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking of ESPN 30 for 30s, right? And we go and we see the
Yeah, that's
storylines they
another great example.
create a beautiful connection where you now are more invested in that athlete's experience or more invested in that sports experience, more invested in that team's experience, where you now feel more connected because there is a story attached to it. And documentaries really create that. I think Welcome to Wrexham, right? And you see Rob McElhenney, Ryan
Yeah, that
Reynolds, the
blew up
team,
for
and
sure.
how big that documentary went, which it's 1 in 1,000, 1 in 100, whatever, but how much of a task and how a U.S. not U.S. sorry, how a League Two side in the English league, which is it's the fourth league down, now has a massive social media following and has a huge connection to millions of people across the world because of one documentary. That was
Right.
done really well, but that's the type of power that this has because it's relationships, it's connectedness. You're building storylines and connecting with people in their heart, their soul, right? And being able to see that. And surfing is one of
Yeah.
those really unique sports where
People
you
love
have a
behind
lot
the
of
scenes stuff.
really cool people that you're going to be able to connect with and they like to connect. And I think that's just a
Absolutely.
big part of what the surfing character is. So I'm really
Yeah,
excited to see it and really excited to see the stories they create and the people they get to showcase and the
me too.
relationships that it
For
builds.
sure, this is something I'll be watching. So I wanted to ask you, do we think this deal helps attract more sponsors to the athletes, and does it translate into a revenue bump for the league because of the fact that they're just being featured on ESPN?
I think it depends how ESPN does it. I think absolutely it leads to a larger sponsorship pool because you have more eyes on you, and the simple fact of ESPN
Right,
has millions of viewers and millions of people who go and use their
right.
services every day. In addition to the way their social media and the way their recording teams works, it might make their social media and dynamic actions in that way a bit easier, rather than trying to do it without the aid of that service.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be super interesting to see. I definitely think it has that type of impact. But
It
again, as I
has
was
already
saying,
helped a little bit. They already, and I'm quoting, have inked new sponsorships with the likes of Lexus and Eventbrite. So Lexus, pretty big car company, so they've already started to get new sponsorships from this. I think definitely the more eyeballs that they get on them, the more that type of stuff comes in, right? And I will say though, I think it'll help out the surfers in particular because people will start to connect with them on a personal level, and especially when businesses see that, they think this guy's really personable. If we partner with him, it'll increase our product share, right? Like increase our I'm looking for market share. That's the word I'm looking
mm,
for. Um, because we're able to get our product out to more people through them. That's why people hire influencers in the first place, right? Is to get their product out to people through a large following, which I mean, within the surfing community, a lot of these guys that will be featured in the documentary are going to have large followings. They're going to feature the top surfers and the most personable surfers. So I will say I think that'll help the top surfers for sure because if you think about it, like they have a lot of travel expenses because they're going all over the world to surf in these tournaments. I mean, like I can't even imagine what they're spending on hotels and stuff and food. I mean, because you're going and flights, you're going all over the place.
yeah, absolutely. It is a super cool and unique opportunity for these hardworking, passionate people to really be blessed. And super excited to see what ends up happening. One for the leagues, because we want to see every sports league, as we discussed in other podcasts. We want to see every sports league succeed. And finding the time and the amount of people to watch your league so you're going to be competitive and really get that is hard. And I think
Yeah,
ESPN is one of the best companies at doing it. So the World
yeah,
Surfing League's made a right and a good choice here going forward to really
yeah,
attack an audience, which I think they can really grow. Makes me excited for it.
for sure. I think for sure the money coming into some of the surfers will definitely increase as it should. I mean, they're pro athletes as much as any other league is, and I don't think I don't think a lot of people know that. Um, so Surfline reporter Nick Carroll estimates that surfers on the world tour earn between $250 and $400,000. I saw this in multiple different places. SurfHungry.com also had the same figures, but like what also doesn't factor into that is A, I mentioned the travel expenses, but B, the equipment expenses. Boards break all the time, and boards are super expensive. Boards are like to get a good surfboard, it's like $2,000 or above. And like I've been into some surf shops. I remember I was in Hampton Beach and I went into a surf shop and some of their boards were like $2,500. And I was 16 at the time. I was like, am I gonna buy a surfboard for $2,500 or am I gonna try to buy a used boat? I ended up buying a used boat, but like, and then the wax on top of that, because you have to wax the board almost every time you use it, and wax is expensive. So the equipment stuff, like, is a huge expense. So I think the money coming into these surfers from sponsors is going to really help them and improve their quality of life, because that average salary that I mentioned, a lot of that depends on where they place in the tournaments, right? The bottom guys aren't getting as much. It's like golf, right? The top guys get a lot more than the bottom guys. It depends on where you place. So I think this will bring more revenue into the sport overall, which, I mean, obviously we talked about it a lot, but the more revenue you can make, the more possibilities you can have with, increasing your locations, increasing your advertising, increasing your staffing, all those different things that help you grow,
Mm, absolutely, and
and
well
even the
said.
talent.
It is absolutely crucial for a league's growth and for all these things that you just pointed out to happen, because you can't continue as a league, and nor can you continue as a professional athlete if the lifestyle you're living, no matter how much you enjoy it, isn't sustainable and you're not able to build
No,
something, right?
no,
You're sitting there and they're spending, and this board snaps now. Oh, I have to go spend another $2,000 to buy a board, and I don't think a pro surfer at this level should have to do that. I think they should have a board sponsorship, and they should have somebody who's, oh, the lights just turned off where I am. They should have
yeah, I
they should
noticed
have a
that.
they should have a board
You're shooting in
sponsorship
black
and
and white
somebody
mode
who
now.
they should have a board sponsorship and somebody supporting them where they have that, just like every athlete does. So, for example, we see soccer stars and they get free cleats. They get new cleats every month. They
Yeah,
get new gloves every month. They don't have to worry about that because their tools, right, are worth money. And a server's tools is one of the most difficult sports to pick up. It's really difficult. To be really good at it is hard.
yeah,
Just like any board sport, it takes a lot of talent, it takes a lot of training, it takes a lot of thought, it takes a lot of flow.
a lot of
And being able to,
finesse.
yeah, exactly, right? And being able to implement that and being something good at something like that, it becomes a lifestyle, right? And
Yeah,
when that lifestyle isn't sustainable, it's hard to see, and it's hard for a league to succeed. So
yeah,
really hoping that we see growth here.
yeah, for sure. I just had a thought. Do you think this is kind of like their savior as a league? Because I personally think it is, because before they were on Bain Sports, who only has about 9 million subscribers, and a few other smaller networks. So that's not a lot of people that you're reaching. That's not a large audience that you're even getting your product out to. And then you go to ESPN, obviously, arguably the biggest sports media outlet in the world. That's a huge jump, right? That's a huge improvement. So I think this might be the savior of their league. I think this might be the jumping off point for them. And obviously it's a small scale investment with only like the 10 championships, but I really think that documentary piece is going to be the key. If that succeeds and succeeds really well, which I believe it will, because I think people are super interested in stuff they don't know about, right? And not a lot of people know about surfing. Not a lot of people do. I mean, unless you're from a culture where surfing is prevalent, like, you have to be on a coast, right? You either have to be somewhere on the East Coast or somewhere on the West Coast. All those states that are in the middle, or even countries in other parts of the world that are in the middle, are landlocked. They don't know that much about surfing, right? So getting this documentary out to people and teaching them about it will tell them that it's a product worth investing their time and money into to be able to experience.
Absolutely, and Paul, well said. I think it's huge for them to be on ESPN. It's a huge statement for their league of, we want to be something bigger, we want to be greater, and it's a, again, going back to the concept of what the NWSL just did with the free entry. You are now going and putting yourself on something where somebody who already has this ESPN Plus subscription can go from, oh, I'm just scrolling to find something to watch. Oh, there's this surfing league. I've never seen that before. I can watch that. Right? It's the level of entry is easier. It's simpler. You're no longer on a smaller platform. Right? So you
Right.
have more eyes on you in the immediacy, which is really cool. So hopefully, and I pray for this, because I think if ESPN does it right, they're their savior. Right? If they really
Yeah.
prioritize it and really make it something special, and they really make this partnership something special that we can see the league grow, we'll see something really cool. But if they don't and they get put set aside where it's like, oh, here's just another thing that we have, right?
Yeah.
So I really want to see a little bit of focus on them, something really unique, some similar to what the X Games has been able to do. But if we don't see that level of commitment from this partnership, it would concern me that maybe we don't see that.
Yeah.
But it has the potential to be the savior. I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that really is the big takeaway is I really hope ESPN does focus on this because it could turn out to be an amazing product, right? It really could turn out to be an amazing product because I think surfing is it's a really cool concept, a really cool sport that not a lot of people get to experience because of being landlocked and the ability that it takes to do it, right? It's so finesse based, it's so balance based. Not a lot of people have that type of balance to be able to do that. I know when I tried surfing for the first time, I could not stand up on the board for like 30 minutes. So, it does take some skill. I do want to learn to surf. So maybe watching this will convince me to finally break down and go buy a board. But I think we've hit the nail on the head, to use the right expression this time. We've hit the nail on the head. Let's move on to our sports quotes of the week. So
One more joke
yeah,
before we move on from
okay,
surfing. We
okay.
think the middle American surfing viewer. What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Surfing on the Great Lakes.
Who has done that before?
Chicken
Chicken
Joe.
Joe.
I knew you were going there too. I literally
Chicken Joe in there.
that was the first thing that came to my mind too. I was like, "There's no way he's about to say Chicken Joe." So for all the Chicken Joes out there, you got your wish. You're on ESPN now.
Hell yeah, let's go. Get it in. Okay, now we can move on.
All right. This gives me a chance to say the sports quote of the week, right? So I'm glad you did that. All right. So mine was from Jim Harbaugh, new head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. So that in itself is super interesting. Just won a national title at Michigan and is choosing to leave. And that's a whole different conversation we can have. But I want to focus on this quote for now. The only job you start at the top is digging a hole. So we know we've got to earn our way. So this is really interesting to me because the Chargers obviously were not a great team last year, but they have some good bones. They have a pretty good quarterback in Justin Herbert. A lot of people think so. They have a good running back in Austin Eckler. They have a couple of good defensive pieces, Khalil Mack in particular. So, I mean, they have pieces, but I think this is really interesting to talk about from a life perspective. This quote, the only place you start at the top is digging a hole, right? So nothing is going to be given to you. You have to earn your way up. You have to earn it. Otherwise, I mean, you're stuck digging, right? That's it. You got to pick up the shovel before you get to the top if we're talking about getting out of a hole, right? So I think it's kind of a really interesting metaphor for life in general. Whatever you want to accomplish, you have to pick up the shovel before you can do anything that you want to accomplish.
Absolutely, and I agree, Paul. I love this quote. Beautifully said, very poetic. It made me want to give a little snaps, all right, as we're going through for Jim Harbaugh. But looking at this, right, when you go into a business, when you go into a classroom, when you go into a new sports team, right, you don't have a pre-established standing. You are somebody who's now entering a new social situation where it's totally different. The lights
are back on.
And it's totally different. You are the quote-unquote low man on the totem pole, right? And we hear that all the time.
Can I go off topic for a second?
Yes, go run it.
The lights going on and off are such a clear indicator of the state of the way things are here at the moment. Always changing. For the
Always
last week or so. You never know what to expect next. Seriously. Ever since the semester started, it's just been like that. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
It's only up from here. We believe.
Don't say it's only up from here. You're going to jinx this. We don't know what else could happen.
You're right. We never know. And I think kind of to that point, right, in a similar way of things are ever changing. You enter a room and into this quote, right? We're St. Joseph's College. We've just had this crazy time, hell of a time, right? Well, we got a hole to dig. We got a place a ladder to climb, something to reestablish ourselves, something to reset ourselves, and really go and attack this semester, right?
Yeah.
Somebody could go and say, well, this semester's dead. We've had a bad first week.
Yeah, true.
Or they could turn around and say, well, time to rebuild the rings in the ladder and go step by
Yeah.
step and make this college the best place it can be, make this experience the best place it can be, right? And really build from there, right? I don't know how the heck I tied that back into the quote, but we're
But you
there.
did it. So I have an even weirder tie-in. So in in a lot of sports teams, something happens like your head coach leaves and it shocks your organization, right? So how do you rebuild? How do you move on from there? And if you do start at the bottom, right? If you are an organization that's not having a lot of success, you have to figure out the right way to dig the hole out, right? And you have to figure out what tools you're going to use. Is the shovel the best tool to use, right? Because there's multiple different things that you can do, and you have to explore all those different avenues in order to find the best solution. So it's really part of that whole planning process. And we talked about this in sports governance, like the whole planning process for an organization yesterday. And I really think it's you have to think about all the different impacts of your decision, right? If I make this decision, then A, B, and C are going to happen. Whereas if I make this decision, only one of those things is going to happen. So, and which one is going to lead to the right result? So when you're working in sports, when you're really working in any industry, you kind of have to think about what is going to be the right choice for the business. But I have to explore different choices, right? To
Mm,
make sure I'm covering all grounds that I can.
absolutely, Paul. And I have to say, that's my sports business take of the day. That's my favorite take of the day so far. You got me fired up with this, right? If you're digging a hole, and I have dug a lot of holes in my life. Not speaking to metaphorical, I dug a bunch of holes for a garden once. It was really cool. It was a lot of fun. Okay. Are we digging? Are we using the pickaxe? We're using the shovel. We're using the dynamite. Are we going in there? We're just blowing everything up and say, this is how I'm going to be. I'm going to show up into the room. I'm going to be that big personality that's going to say, hi, I'm here. I'm Zach Creekmore, and this is what I do. Right?
Yeah,
Or I'm going to take a more chiseled approach. I'm going to use the chisel. Touch, 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 touch.
right.
Right? Delicate, simple, refined, confident. Right? There's so many different ways you can go, and knowing the process you're going to take and really examining each option and the benefit of each tool, knowing your toolbox, building your toolbox is one of the biggest and most important things you can do from a professional, career, social life, individual development. There's so many different things that you can do and develop, and it's really a unique opportunity.
Okay, so I didn't come up with a useless stat of the day. That was one thing I failed to do. But I'm creating a new segment. That's my phrase of the day. Build your toolbox, man. That's awesome. That is awesome. I think
That's a
no
Woodside
matter
classic.
yeah, for real. No matter what area you end up working in, I think that is a great that's a great phrase, right? Build your toolbox, have different skills that make you kind of a Swiss Army knife to your business where you can do a bunch of different jobs, right? That's what employers are looking for right now. It's people that are versatile. So I think build your toolbox is our phrase of the day. Um, let's get to your sports quote of the week.
Yes, absolutely. So if you're not into the soccer world, if you haven't heard about this yet, Jurgen Klopp recently announced that at the end of this season he's going to be stepping down. So another coaching quote. Jurgen had this to say: "I am, how can I say it, running out of energy. I have no problem now. Obviously, I'm absolutely fine now. I know that I cannot do the job again and again and again. After the years we spent together, and after all the things we went through together, the least I owe you is the truth, and that is the truth." Jurgen Klopp. Now, if you don't know anything about Jurgen Klopp, he's been Liverpool coach for the last 8 seasons. Throughout his history, he's coached at Mainz, Dortmund, and Liverpool, and each has been a 7-year stint, which is really interesting. So he's gone 1 year past that 7-year stint, which is a really strong statement of I really love Liverpool. I'm going to change kind of what is my model. So really awesome to see, and really great to see him, one, being honest about his season, his team's having a great season and playing really well, and two, being honest about where he's at, and being able to level with the audience, the viewership, the fans, the media in that way, and kind of be like, well, this is where I am. This is who I am. This is what I'm doing. Not something we see a lot in American sports, at least from how I feel in my experience. So really, really great to see a true connection between fans and media and Jurgen to build something really special, something which he's really built throughout all 8 years that he's been at Liverpool.
Yeah. So I think the key part of this to me is he basically said, "I want to be honest with you," right? Honesty is key for establishing relationships,
Mm.
for establishing trust. And I think when coaches and when top sports figures like this, even when front office people say things like I want to be honest, and then really give the truth and the opinion to the fans like they're talking to a normal person and not trying to talk down to them or like explain it like a dummy or something like that. When they really say this is how it is, I think people respect them more. I think it brings people closer to them, and it makes these people who we idolize, like coaches, more human, right? It makes them more human. I think that was my big takeaway from this.
Absolutely, Paul. And I think you're absolutely right. Right, like after reading that quote, and even I've followed Jurgen Klopp for years. I've followed his Gegenpress and all this stuff. It's how I coach in a personality way. I take after him a little bit, and it's just a beautiful thing to see and be able to kind of build as that fan perspective a connection with somebody who really is a unique personality, a unique person, and through my upbringing, I can think of even when I was 11, watching a 4-4 Tunes episode, which if you know what that is, it's a crazy reference. Enjoy it. And I'm sitting there and I'm seeing a cartoon version of Jurgen Klopp singing about beating Arsenal 4-0, and it's boom, 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 boom. Go Jurgen's Liverpool, right? And it's that type of moment where through media and connection and through an honesty of who he is as a person, I've really been able to build a special relationship. And I think a lot of fans really have been able to build a special relationship where this is the type of person that we want to see in management. This is the type of person we want to see in sports where they have that high EQ and that really strong connection with fan bases, with passionate, beautiful sport, right?
Yeah, I think it takes EQ. You just mentioned EQ. I think that is a key factor in being able to be in a management position, especially in sports, especially because sports can be so variable and changes so much. You have to be willing to kind of go with the flow, right?
Mm,
Like you can have procedures and policies that you fall back on as an organization, but you have to be willing to adapt, right? The phrase "adapt or die" exists for a reason, and I think having emotional intelligence, EQ, is a big part of that. I think being honest with the fans and being honest with the people who are buying your product is a key piece in that. And I think that's kind of what he provides here. Even though it's about him leaving, it's honest, right? And I think that brings people closer to the product in a way.
absolutely agree, and well said. I'm super excited to see what his team does for the rest of the season. Does the investment, does the passion they play this game with change? Does it change because it's Jurgen's last quote unquote journey, last placement, last moment with Liverpool, or does it sink because they feel like, oh, I'm losing somebody and I'm losing something that I'm
Right.
really connected to? So it's super exciting, and I kind of feel like I relate to it a little bit myself. It's like, are you coming to an end of a chapter, or are we moving on to the next thing? And it's a hard process to be in.
Don't
It's a
even get me
hard thing to
started
think
on
about.
that right now.
Right?
I'll talk to you off
It's
air about that. Good lord.
agreed, ditto. And it's an interesting connection because I think a lot of people relate to the way Jurgen's feeling, and I think a lot of people want to see that story develop and want to be a part of that story. So
Yeah.
excited for Liverpool, excited for the Liverpool fan, excited for Jurgen. He's done amazing work, really high, passionate work that I really admire and really honor him. And I think through this conversation, we can tell people who have high IQ and are willing to be honest with really the whole world in what they say are people we really respect and really really
For sure.
value in our world, especially in sport management.
Yeah, absolutely. Dude, we gritted out a Friday night pod. I'm proud of us. Nobody else is doing this right now, by the way. Like nobody else is is doing a podcast in college at 9:30 on a Friday night. So, I hope you guys appreciate the commitment that we're trying to show, because we're super passionate about this. I was writing, I'm not going to say what type of essay, but I was writing an essay the other day where I was talking about the podcast, and man, I was like, I've had so much fun with this. Like, I really have started to have a lot of fun with this, and especially like making the graphics and stuff. I'm learning so much. So I honestly, no place I'd rather be right now than doing this. So thank you guys for listening, for supporting as always. Um, if you have anybody who is interested in coming on the show that you know that works for a professional team, please get them in touch with us. We would love to hear ideas for new guests and hear different perspectives from around the industry. We really want to grow as professionals with other people, and that comes from learning from the best. So that's I think that's one of my goals. Is hopefully I've been trying to get some guests, but hopefully next time we can actually connect with one. So if you have anybody that is interested, please reach out to them, or send us their information, or send them our information, whatever works for you. But as always, go follow us on socials, SBT_podcast on Instagram, SBT.pod23 on TikTok, and SBT_pod23 on Twitter. We've been trying to put some different types of content out there. Hopefully, we end up taking off eventually. I've been having a little trouble getting the views up, but I think the more we try, the more we can. It's like trial and error, right? We'll get better at it. So I'm really excited for the future. I guess we'll see you guys next week. Hopefully, our tech issues are gone by then.
Prayers.
Have a good week, guys.